During this time of fear and uncertainty, it can be hard to find things to be positive about. Millions of people are isolated from their loved ones, but as Fox's Trey Yinks reports, many people are trying to make the most of it.
As social distancing becomes the new norm during the coronavirus pandemic, many people are finding creative ways to help themselves and others cope with the crisis, from playing tic-tac-toe through windows.
We want to be X or O.
To delivering food to the homebound elderly.
We want to help, so we're here for the community, and especially at this hard time right now.
A fire department in California is clocking in extra hours, grocery shopping for people who can't make it out of their homes. Meanwhile, in London, famous landmarks lighting up in blue to thank healthcare workers as people showed their support with a massive citywide round of applause.
We're very, very thankful for everything you're doing.
Puppies are also getting some extra love in these uncertain times. An aquarium in Atlanta is closed to humans but opened its doors for this pair of foster pups, giving them a chance to explore the fish tanks all by themselves. And in Washington, D.C., a pet shelter is seeing more people volunteer to foster animals.
The outpouring of support from the community is just, it's so lovely and such a bright ray of sunshine in like really scary and uncertain time.
Some chefs are taking to the kitchen to cheer up their communities. A to-go shop in Vietnam selling Corona burgers to help make people less afraid of the virus. And a bakery in Germany is creating cakes shaped as one of the most popular products these days, toilet paper. These stories just a few examples of communities around the world rallying together in a time of crisis. Trey Yinks, Fox.